And I think we're live. Hey, everybody, Sean Murphy from 1455. Here we are for another installment of the 1455 interview. Getting a lot of great feedback. I think everyone agrees that right now there can't be too much community and conversation, and it's particularly interesting to see how writers are adapting to these strange times. So it's with tremendous pleasure that I introduce our next guest, and I will start by saying, thus far, I've done most of the outreach. Kim was great enough and kind enough to be part of our literary festival this summer, which if you go to our YouTube page, you can see him in action on his panel. He reached out to me after Lou Byard's interview and said, book me. And of course, what he didn't realize is he was on my list. So he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I'm very excited and happy to have Kim Powers here. Let me read his bio, which I will say I had to truncate because it's long and impressive. The whole 14 minutes and 55 seconds could otherwise be taken up by reading his accomplishments. So this is the short version of Kim Powers' bio. He's the author of the new novel, Rules for Being Dead, the thriller, Dig Two Graves, Capote in Kansas, A Ghost Story, and the critically acclaimed memoir, The History of Swimming, which was both a Barnes & Noble Discover selection and a Lambda Award finalist, a Literary Award finalist for Best Memoir of the Year. He's worked at ABC News for the past 23 years and is currently senior writer for the network's iconic newsmagazine 2020, a part of the team that has received an unprecedented 3 consecutive Edward R. Murrow Awards. He's also received 2 Emmys for his work at both Good Morning America and 2020. He lives in New York City and Asbury Park, New Jersey, and is married to Tony-winning costume designer Jess Goldstein. Yay. Kim, it is a thrill to have you here. Before I go further, let me start the timer so we can be on the clock. And let's kick this baby off. I will first say greetings from Asbury Park, which is the famous Bruce Springsteen thing. That is where I am now and have been for the last half a year. So love it here. Greetings from Asbury Park, indeed. Now this is going to go viral. We're going to get the boss to retweet.
Oh, God, if only. I almost killed the boss once. I almost ran over him in the street. But we'll talk about that later.
Well, we might get to that. All right, let's get it on. The first book that made you want to be a writer, or a book that changed your life?
Oh, do you know what? I'm gonna say a series of novels, and it's so silly and immature, but it's Nancy Drew books. I started reading, and I wonder if any of your other writers have said that yet. I started reading Nancy Drew when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and begged my parents to buy them to me at the local Woolworths or Duke and Ayers, which were the 5 and dime stores. And they kept trying to sneak in some Hardy Boys. I said, no, I want to read about Nancy. And my friends and I started a little, we called it the Footlighters Club, after the drama group that Nancy and her pals form in one of the books. And we started writing little plays and little short stories for ourselves. They were always mysteries. And if we, in our little pencils could pump out 3 pages, that felt like a book. That was, oh my God, you wrote 3 pages? So I think Nancy, I blame it on Nancy. I think that's, and my path to writing was very circuitous, but she was and I read prodigiously as a kid. But I think Nancy made me think, oh, I want to come up with mysteries and put pieces together that you can solve.
I love that. No one said Nancy Drew yet. I think someone might have mentioned Hardy Boys, but I think it's important, in this series is showing that the huge importance of learning to read and fall in love with that at an early age. And it's like we all owe an amazing debt to the children's authors that were such indelible influences on us.
And there was another writer, very kind of purple prosy, almost like women's romance writer named Phyllis A. Whitney, who wrote both, kind of grown-up romances, but sort of kids' mysteries as well. And I loved her as well. And my only source of books, other than the Nancy Drews, was the local library. So I'd always, go get the newest Phyllis A. Whitney. And then it was like the earliest version of a book club before a book club even existed. My little friends and I would like exchange the book, the one library book that we could have out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We would keep checking it out so we could all read it and talk about it.
Yep. Yep. In the good old analog days.
Yeah.
Okay. How about, who would you say is your most profound artistic influence?
I'll also say somebody who could be accused of being sort of a purple prose writer, but on a much higher level, Pat Conroy. When did I first read Pat Conroy? This was later. This was certainly in high school, if not college. But I'm certainly aware of the great Santini and his early sort of memoir, The Water is Wide, which became the movie Conrack, about teaching.
Yep.
But I remember, and this is almost like too late to have said he was an influence, but The Prince of Tides just knocked me out. And I remember saying to somebody, this is my life. This is my own family story. And I think nothing in the book, some things in the book, because I came from a crazy family like he did, were similar. But just the attitude or the awareness that you could tap into your personal pain, your family story. You could write about it, whether you do it in a very direct autobiographical way, or if you sort of gussy it up as fiction. That gave me a lot of freedom. But I also did this very interesting thing, and I don't know if this still exists. When I was in high school, I grew up in Texas, which you can maybe hear a little bit in my accent. There was this thing in high school called the UIL, University Interscholastic League. And it was a series of competitions in all sorts of different areas, like poetry interpretation, or oral dramatic prose interpretation, everything from like stenography to speed writing to spelling to essay writing. And for the 3 or 4 years in high school, I did this prose interpretation. And you selected writers. There were 3 different categories: American writers, sort of European, the UK writers, and then everybody else. And you had to find a short story, or to cut it down to a 7-minute reading of any of those writers. So I spent every spare minute I had back in the local library checking out gazillions of short stories to find the perfect one that fit me and that I could deliver to a crowd. And sort of in the same vein of the Pat Conroy, I'm just thinking of this now, the earliest influence was really Carson McCullers. Mm-hmm. The Southern writer, a lot of personal pain on the page. I don't so much think I imitated or aspired to her writing style, like sentence by sentence, but her world of writing, what she took as material, and this sort of dark, almost kind of freakish world really appealed to me. So Carson and Pat Conroy, way up there.
Great answer. And I love the concept, an author's world of writing. I think that's a wonderful way to put that. Awesome. All right. How about an album or movie or both that you recommend without reservation?
All About Eve, which is I don't know if it's just the gay go-to, but it's certainly, that would be my desert island movie. That I watch endlessly whenever it's on, pops up on TCM or something. Yeah. I can quote it nonstop verbatim. And I just, I wouldn't say I find anything new in it every time I see it, which is often what people say about a book they go back to again and again. But I just delight in its world, the famous Betty Davis played Margot Channing, the diva, and the sort of upstart Eve Harrington who comes in to usurp her, and sort of the world of Broadway and a little bit Hollywood, which was sort of the fantasy world I lived in, both when I was a kid and now. So.
Well, that's the first time that particular title's come up.
Oh, good.
I'm glad it
well,
did.
Maybe I've converted some All About Eve fans here then.
Let's hope. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a tough one, but a fun one. How about the best first or last line of any book?
Oh, that one is easy. And it's a last line that imprinted on me the minute I read it and has stayed with me since then. And it's the last line of To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. And Jim, it's Scout and Jim, the two kids, and Atticus Finch is the father. Jim has been attacked by, I forget his name, the bad guy, and has his arm broken, and the mysterious Boo Radley has saved him, this boogeyman in the neighborhood, and has brought him home. And that beautiful scene both in the book and the movie where Atticus is there and Boo Radley slowly unveils himself hiding behind the door in the bedroom. And the last line of the book, and the book is all from Scout's point of view, is talking about Atticus watching over Jim, the son, his wounded son. He goes, and he would be there all night long. He would watch over Jim all night long and be there when he waked up in the morning. I mean, I sort of getting teary-eyed just saying it and thinking about it now. And it just summed up everything about a parent's protectiveness and fierce devotion to a child and wanting to comfort them. There's a peculiarity. I've always thought about that word "waked," which seems particularly Southern rather than woke. And when he woke up in the morning. And I'd also a lifelong obsession with Harper Lee and Truman Capote. And one of my books, my second book, in fact, is a novel called sort of a Fantasia, Capote in Kansas, about Harper Lee and Truman. So that, life, and by no means would I say To Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite book at all. It's not even in the top 10, but I recognize its place, and that line is just the most perfect line of all time, I think.
Well done. The first time that's come up, and it's great.
Oh,
and,
good.
And
Wow.
This is what we talk about when we talk about writers going deep and the love of word by word, line by line.
Yeah.
All right. How about an underrated author that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Wow. Me? Can I start with me?
Good answer.
Cut that from the tape. I was thinking about this, and there's so many individual books I love that never got their due. But I was thinking about it, and it's another maybe one of these deep fried writers, and I wonder if it's ever come up. There's a writer, James Wilcox, who was a very prominent, and he's still alive. He's 70 now or so. Very prominent Southern writer in the 80s. And he had two huge immediate hits. His first novel was called Modern Baptists. And then there was a book called North Gladiola. And he wrote about a fictional Louisiana town called Tula Springs. But he populated it with the most wonderful characters. And it was kind of tragic comedy, whatever that word is, tragic comic, hilariously funny, and then brutal and bittersweet. And he sort of did the same thing. I mean, created this world, I'm sure based on some reality, but this imaginary world that was sort of the equivalent to the Armistead Maupin Tales of the City books. And he went on, like this continuing cast of characters. And I think there were 8 or 9 books in all. And I mean, it sort of follows his, progress, as a young man and developing writer and moving to New York. And it so kind of paralleled my paths of moving from Texas to New York, where I've lived now 40 years. I know at the time they were a big deal. They were maybe thought of a little bit more as a regional series of books. But he I think, is a major writer. I love his books and would love them to be rediscovered. James Wilcox. Yeah.
Thank you for the shout out. Okay, my personal favorite in this series. Why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, is there a classic that you just haven't gotten around to yet that you want to read?
I have not read Moby Dick. And I want you to do like some Steve Kornacki statistics when this is all over. Those of us who have versus who haven't. But I haven't read Moby Dick, but I make fun of Moby Dick a lot. Mm-hmm. And a few times I've probably lied and said I did read Moby Dick. And I will, for a minute, talk about my twin brother, who was a great reader. And I remember when he was reading Moby Dick in college, and we went to the same college, we did this thing, which is what only goofy, kids could do. In the cafeteria, rather than saying like anything about Moby Dick, we yell out, "Moby's dick!" and I once wrote a play, and there's this character, this candy striper nurse, a Texas girl, and she's very innocent, and she's going to sort of a junior college, community college, and she's talking to somebody who's dying in a hospital bed about having to write a paper on Moby Dick. And she has this monologue where she talks about the teacher making her read it and saying, well, the well is really God. And she goes, I got all confused. I thought it was just talking about a well. And then she goes, some of this great literature is very upsetting. I think that's the line I would use about Moby Dick. The idea of reading Moby Dick is very upsetting to me and gives me a headache in advance.
Fair enough. Absolutely. A novel that is celebrated and maligned in equal measure, which I think in some ways.
You know what? And to pick up on that, I will, the one great book and thick book that I have tried to read repeatedly that is beloved by so many people and so many people who love the kind of writing I do, but I've never been able to read it, is A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy O'Toole, right?
Toole, no O'Toole. John Kennedy.
John Toole, yes.
Yep.
I've tried that book like 5 or 6 times. I know I should love it. I know I should get it. It's about everything that I am in my life and that I've lived and that I write about. And I can't get past the first 20 or 30 pages of it. So that will be when I'm truly, on the desert island and nothing else to do, I will try that one.
Okay, fair enough. It's worth the slog. I think Catcher in the Rye is a book you have to read in your teens, and Confederacy of Dunces, best read in your 20s probably.
Yeah, I think maybe I waited too late.
If everyone in the world is an idiot, there's a peculiar point of view where by your 30s, you're, you've been disabused of that.
Yeah.
All right, how about, is there a single theme or topic that your work addresses or tries to address?
Interesting. I don't think it's something I try to address, but I think the inevitable thing that comes up in all of my writing is abandoned children. Abandoned children trying to find a home in the biggest meaning of the word home. And I was not in a literal way an abandoned child. My mother died when I was very young, which is what the New Book Rules for Being Dead is about. But I always felt homeless and felt like I was looking for a place to belong and a place of permanence. And to the point of kind of creating a fantasy reality of what I would like my life to be with that mother is. So I think that's what comes through. And in my older years, and I think my first 3 books, you could read them as very angry books and bratty even to a degree. This last book, which took forever to write, I think there's an element of forgiveness in it and of grace. And I think the theme I've now moved into as an older writer, and an older person, is just the difficulty of life, what it takes to survive day to day. That's it. That's all. That's all writing and life should be about, and is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an interesting pivot from Confederacy of Dunces, right? The notion of, when the world isn't doing what you expect it to do, where an older and presumably wiser author or human being understands that it's a struggle. Writing is a struggle and life is a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to try and make sense of that. All right, so I'm going to combine a couple of questions.
Yeah.
As briefly as possible, thoughts on writing routines, writer's block, and how that has played into the development of your career.
I do, when my first book was this memoir called The History of Swimming that took forever to write. And I would really go into this, I think maybe I read Jonathan Franzen did this when he was writing Corrections or something like that. And I adopted it because I was so concerned about this purity in my writing and not wanting outside influences to get to me. or I was still like in the closet as a writer and like didn't want anybody to know, even though I sort of wrote as a profession. This was a very different thing. So I would literally write in the dark, and I would put a headband around my eyes so I couldn't see anything. And I would just start typing the stream of consciousness stuff. And I was sort of writing that. I always described it as like, until the story in my head exhausted itself. And I could get a good 4 or 5 pages out of that, complete with hand cramps and finger cramps and wrist cramps and just writing so hard and in such a feverish, concentrated way. But it was all about trying to not think about the writing. It was all about just trying to let me be the vessel the writing came through. And that's a little pretentious, I realize, but I still do that to a degree because I just still haven't owned up to kind of being a writer. And I have this sort of superstition that that if I try to think about it too much, that I'll get in my way. And to that degree, I mean, this is part of my writing ritual. No matter where I am in the manuscript, I will always go back. I always have to go back to the first page, even if I'm at the end of it, like on 350. You come up in the Word Google document and you left off here. I have this, it's like this good luck thing that something will happen if I don't do it. I will literally start at page 1 and page through all the pages to get to page 350. And a little bit it's a procrastination thing, like, oh, holy fuck, what am I going to write about today? And then I get there. I don't think I've ever had writer's block, I can say. I've always just kind of gotten to it, I think, yeah. But I did write on that first book, again, because I had a very demanding full-time job. I did that sort of cliche thing about setting the alarm early and getting up at, 5 in the morning and writing for a few hours before I had to go to the office. Now, I pretty much write just on the weekends. A little bit, I mean, now that my schedule's been a little more relaxed because of COVID, I can write a bit during the day, but I would just jam a lot into the weekends.
Thank you. That's a fascinating response. Some great insight there. How about a setback, artistic or otherwise, that in hindsight has somehow kind of shaped your career or your trajectory?
I feel like every step I take has been a setback, and I've learned to live with it. I'll be honest and say that getting this new book, Rules for Being Dead, to print was a setback. The 10-year plus journey it took, and I kept thinking it was done. And thank God I have diligence, not the right word, a never flagging agent with tons of energy who never gave up on it. And I kept writing it, and we'd send it out and get rejections on it. And then I'd realize, oh yeah, it isn't really ready. Then I'd go back to, writing some more. Then we'd send it out. And we got, I had talked about the big 5. It's the book of mine that got closer to some, bigwig editors and publishers than anything else. And then there would always be a no from someone, from the marketing team, from the God knows, who. Those were setbacks. And this book, which I did have the instinct from when I first started it, that was going to be my best book. And many of my readers who've read all my stuff think it is. I think they were like, I would say like these 4 or 5 big times we sort of took it out. That was kind of a setback, because I kept thinking, why is nobody getting this the way I do? It's so good, I know this. But all those setbacks in turn took me to a place of re-examining it, maybe going out and hiring an outside editor once or twice, freelance editors. And really, just that cliche about like, a sculptor takes a block of granite and they see the statue inside, but you just have to keep carving away until you get to it. This book is the poster child of that, of what it took to get to that. So that was like a 10-year setback, you could say. And I actually wrote and published other things during it, but that was almost like the sort of Damocles hanging over my head. When will this one be out in the world?
Yeah,
but I learned from it.
And I feel like in this series, it's a young series, but already we've had a recurring theme of perseverance and that it seldom comes easily. And I guess normally I'd be circumspect, like, are we not encouraging young writers? But I think what this really brings home to anyone that's an aspiring writer is it seldom comes easily. And if you're not in it for the right reasons, you're going to be disappointed. So I do think at a certain point, kind of the Darwin's rule applies. Like if you think it's going to be easy to do and successful,
do something
would
else.
happen, but it's very unlikely that it'll happen. That tees up a great question. How would you define or explain what literary success means to you?
It's so, and again, this answers a different one than I would have had, 15, 16 years when my first book came out. It's just literary success literally is getting a book published, is having somebody pay the however many or few thousands of dollars it takes to print pages and put it between two covers, that somebody believed in you enough and that they get it out into the world and that anybody has read it. And both your family and the people who love you, but the first outside email you get from somebody who's read your work and has been laughed with it, been entertained by it, been moved by it, thought differently about something, that is literary success. I mean, and it goes hand in hand with that thing you just said about, young writers. It's just, success is so impossible. If you go into it hoping for riches or fame or anything other than just having done your best at writing your best story, and without any expectation about financial reward, so you have to write like your life depends on it. And if you don't get the story out, you will have failed. But you can't have any expectation of a financial success. It can only be emotional success, I think. And that's literary success to me.
That's a beautiful, refreshing, honest answer. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, last and definitely not least, a 1-minute exhortation for a young writer looking for advice.
Keep writing and writing and writing. And hopefully, if you can arm twist some friends into reading your work, make sure it's your absolute best before you send it anywhere. Don't send it out and say, oh, it's almost there, but what do you think about the basic idea? I have so well learned, you only get one shot at anybody reading something, and you don't want to blow that one shot because you can never recover from it. So do whatever you have to do to make sure this is your most polished, your best work that is representing you. Yeah.
Right on. So, Kim, what a pleasure talking to you.
This is great.
Appreciate you taking the time. Remind our viewers how they can find you on the internet. Your website.
My website is called Kim Powers Books at kimpowersbooks.com. You can go there, see a lot about all my books. You can reach me, email me at kim@kimpowersbooks.com. I'm big into social media and being a goofball on it. So I'm Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send out skywriting, and I'll see it and I'll track you down. So
or stalk you at Asbury Park, and maybe be part of a 3-way conversation with the boss, which is
with the boss. It's my dying dream. If I can talk to the boss before I leave this mortal coil, my work here will be done. Absolutely.
Well, that'll be our mission for the coming year. We'll have Bruce play at next year's Lit Fest, and you and I can.
Absolutely. Oh, incredible. And I do want to shout out, I owe this meeting and being a part of Lit Fest to the incredible Beth Ann Patrick, who brought me into the fold. And also, Lou Bayard, who you just interviewed, or his interview just ran. I've been such a fan of. I just love his books, and we have a Facebook friendship. Although we have met in person online on different virtual things, but he's been kind enough to blurb some of my books, and he is, we're on the same age, so he would kill me if I said he is a literary role model of mine, but he is in terms of the depth and the brilliance of his writing. It really is. I mean that, not a suck up. I love it.
No. Listen, I certainly agree. And I've had a lot of fun in this series. What I think is really refreshing is, and I just talked about this recently, but the notion that the art has to speak for itself. It has to account for itself, yada, yada, yada. But when you find really good artists who are also great people, it's so refreshing and inspiring. And I think Lou epitomizes the integrity, the kindness, and the
generosity. Absolutely. Completely.
So he's great. Beth Ann's great. You're great. We'll see you again.
You're great.
We've got some things in the works, so you and I will talk later. But for now, I'm so glad you've been part of the series, and good luck with the next projects, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sean, thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.